Namaste everybody. We are now on the fourth session of the Bhagavad Gita Chapter 1 and we're going to start at verse 25. Just to remind you, we are on the Kurukshetra battlefield where Duryodhana has started describing the armies and now Arjun has also started trying to see what opposition he's facing. So verse 25.
भीष्मद्रोण प्रमुखतः सर्वेषां च महीक्षिताम् उवाच पार्थ पश्यैतान् समवेतान् कुरून् इति. Now Sanjay is saying Bhishmadrona pramukhatah. So front of in the army he says Bhishma and Drona pramukhatah, they are in the front. Sarvesham cha mahikshitam. Sarvesham means all. Mahikshitam means the great warriors or great kings of this. Mahi means Prithvi or earth. He says Uvacha Partha Pashya Etan. Etan Pashya means after seeing these all kings and Bhishma and Drona. Partha Uvacha, Partha said Samavetan Kurun iti. He said when all this gathered, he saw all these Kuru kings and he said something. So that will be in the next verse.
So it says, in the presence of Bhishma, Dronacharya and all the other kings, Sri Krishna said, O Parth, behold these Kurus gathered here. So Sri Krishna has spoken the only 6 words he speaks in this entire chapter. Now, Arjun's chariot is in full view of the entire Kaurava army. And it's quite a clever placement by Sri Krishna if we think about it. So on one side are Arjuna and Sri Krishna, say on this side. On this side are Bhishma and Dronacharya, who are the only 2 who are mentioned. Why do I say it's a clever placement? Because remember we said earlier, Bhishma was a great devotee of Sri Krishna. He worshipped Sri Krishna as a Paramatma himself. By placing himself directly in front of Bhishma, his devotee, we can see psychologically how much that would weaken Bhishma's will to fight. He's now having to fight somebody that he literally worships and considers the Paramatma himself. Then it reminds Bhishma very forcefully, secondly, who am I having to fight? I'm having to fight the person I consider the Paramatma, but I'm also having to fight Arjun, for whom I have great affection as a grandfather. Secondly, he mentions Drona. Now the point here is that Arjun was Drona's favorite pupil. So just as Bhishma was going to be weakened seeing Sri Krishna, Drona is going to be weakened seeing Arjun, because after all he's having to fight and potentially kill his favorite student for whom he not only had a lot of respect but a lot of affection too. Now, from Arjun's point of view, he was right in front of Bhishma and Drona. So he realized, for the first time, I'm going to have to fight them. So why would Sri Krishna have done this? Because this was not to weaken Arjun, but he wanted Arjun, in a practical way, to take into account who are you going to have to fight as well. And in fact, it is this placement and what subsequently happens with Arjun, which we'll come to, that has triggered the entire Bhagavad Gita, that made Sri Krishna speak the Bhagavad Gita to Arjun. Now, in case Arjun feels intimidated, seeing his grandfather, teachers, so many people after all he loved and cared for, on both sides of the battlefield, he calls Arjun Parth. And remember, Parth is another name for Kunti, who's the sister of Vasudeva, who was Sri Krishna's father. In other words, Arjun and he were cousins. So he was trying to reassure Arjun that, yes, of course, I am with you because you are fighting for something that is dharma, but you also happen to be my cousin for whom I have great affection, and therefore I will also protect you personally. And in fact, he does that throughout the battle. He protects all 5 Pandavas at the same time as he protects dharma. So, in this verse, this is very important because we now have actually the main protagonists who were Bhishma and Drona on one side, Arjuna on the other, and Sri Krishna, of course, remember, is not a protagonist because he said he would be unarmed and he's a charioteer. But we have the three main people now facing each other. And we will see in the coming verses that Arjuna's resolve will immediately weaken once he has now understood who he's fighting. Aside from Bhishma and Drona, of course, there are a ton of other kings who are not named. And so Sri Krishna simply says, see who's here.
Yes, so now in next verse, so as Bhagavan has asked him to see, now he's saying in this verse, it says, Tatra pashyat sthitan partha pitru natha pitamahan acharyan matulan bhratrun putran pautran sakhinstatha swasuran surudaschaiva senayorubhayorapi. So in this verse it says, now they are not giving any names, they are showing relationships. So in this verse he says, Tatra apasya sthitan partha. When Partha sees all those whose, then he says, first is Pitrun. He says all his father sides. Then Pitamahan, means grandfathers. Acharyan, teachers. Matulan, maternal uncles. Bhratrun, brothers. Putran, sons. Pautran, grandsons. Sakhins tatha, sakhin means friends. Swasuran, in-laws. Surudaha, who are well-wishers. So when Senayoho Ubhayorapi, he said when in both armies, when he saw all these relatives, he says he shows those relatives, and what happens in next verse it says.
So there Arjuna could see standing in both armies, fathers, grandfathers, teachers, maternal uncles, brothers, cousins, sons, nephews, grandnephews, friends, fathers-in-law, and well-wishers. So, being positioned as he now was, remember he'd asked to be taken to in between the two armies, he said. Well, now that he's in between the two armies, he can see the people very clearly in both armies. His own grandfather, Bhishma, was there, but teachers were there. Dronacharya, Kripacharya, maternal uncles like Shalya, brothers, all his brothers, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Nakul, Sahadev. So he saw them all. His own son, Abhimanyu, grandsons like Ghatotkacha, remember, who was Bhim's son, and Abhimanyu, who was also Sri Krishna's nephew. He saw the grandsons of Bhishma, friends like Satyaki, who, remember, used to be the commander-in-chief of the Yadav army, who was fighting on Duryodhan's side, because remember, Duryodhan chose the army of Sri Krishna, whereas Arjuna chose Sri Krishna himself. Then there were fathers-in-law like Drupad, well-wishers like Shikhandi. Remember, this was the person that Bhishma won't fight. All these people were there in front of him as this great war was about to begin. Note that the reason Arjuna uses the word maternal uncle is because his paternal uncle is Dhritarashtra, who's naturally not on the battlefield. He's the blind king watching and listening through Sanjay what's happening. So at this moment, Arjuna is just taking in the presence of all these people. He's just watching. So now we'll come to verse 27.
Tan samikshya sakaunteyaha sarvan bandhunavasthitan krupaya paraya vishtaha vishidanidamabravita. So now he says Tan Samiksha. So it is still Sanjay is just saying to Dhritarashtra. He says Tan Samiksha means after seeing these all, Tan means those kings, Samiksha means well observed. Sa Kaunteya, the son of Kunti, who is Arjun. Sarvan Bandhun Avasthitan. Sarvan means all, Bandhun means relatives, Avasthitan means situated. After seeing all these relatives, Vishidantam idam vakyam uvacha Madhusudana. He says that Krupaya paraya vishtaha vishidanidam abravit. Krupaya is, I think, with great compassion and grace. Paraya Avishtaha Arjun Vishidan Idam Abravit. With great or deep sorrow, Idam Abravit. He says this to Sri Krishna. So now, from this verse, the word Vishidan, from this word, the name of this chapter became Vishada Yoga. So he is in deep sorrow after seeing these all relatives.
So it says, seeing all his relatives present there, Arjun, the son of Kunti, was overwhelmed with compassion and with deep sorrow, and he spoke the following words. Now note here, remember we said in another verse he's called the Pandava, the son of Pandu, because fighting was a prerogative of men in those days. But interestingly now, when he's overwhelmed with compassion, he's called Kunti, the son of Kunti.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying only women are capable of feeling compassion, but it's interesting that he's now referred to as the son of Kunti. At this point, Arjun has suddenly begun to realize that the people on the battlefield are his own immediate relatives. This includes the Kauravas, who after all were his first cousins. He has no love for them because of everything that they've done. But regardless of who you were, there was a chance of everybody getting killed. That's the nature of war. And it sunk into Arjun now that the casualties, after all, could include his own brothers, his own son, Abhimanyu, the sons of other people, Bhim's children. Everybody could get killed. And it's really begun to sink into Arjun. Now, it's the nature of any civil war, and this is a civil war, that members of the same family can end up on opposite sides of a conflict and get killed. That was the nature of the US Civil War as well. And I've mentioned two in particular. Out of many, many examples were the Terrell brothers. They were both brigadier generals, but on opposite sides of the conflict. James Barber Terrell was within the Confederate Army and was killed at the Battle of Totopotomoy Creek. His brother William Rufus Terrell was within the Union Army, and he was killed at the Battle of Perryville. So two brothers, both on opposite sides, both killed. It's the nature, unfortunately, of civil war, and this was a civil war.
Now Arjuna says, Arjuna Uvacha, Drashtve Swajanam Krishna Yuyutsum Samupasthitam Sidanti Mama Gatrani Mukhancha Parishishyati. Now Arjuna says, Drashtva Imam Swajanam Krishna. Hey Krishna, Imam Swajanam. Imam means this relative. After seeing this relative, now he's saying who are these relative or who are these relatives? He says Yuyutsum. Yuyutsum means who are seeking or who want to have fight or war. Samupasthitam, after seeing this relative who want to or who are seeking to fight, Sidanti Mamagatrani. He says my part of body. He says Sidanti. They are shaking. And Mukhancha Parishishyati. Mukham means, he says, my mouth is also drying up. So he says, after seeing these, my relative and relative who are actually seeking for fight, after seeing them, these are the things which he's saying that is happening to my body and to my mouth.
So Arjuna says, O Krishna, seeing these kinsmen here on both sides, eager for battle, my limbs are quivering and my mouth is drying up. Now Arjuna was very distressed, you can now see, or beginning to get very distressed. He gets more distressed as it goes on. So he calls Krishna simply by his name because he's appealing to his friend. But why was Arjuna so distressed? After all, for weeks, no, months beforehand, he knew full well who would be involved in the war, that all of them were relatives, friends, well-wishers. He'd known this for months. Now, research carried out by MIT, as does much other research, and the name of the publication is Seeing and Imagining Are the Same to the Brain. MIT News of 1st November 2020 says the different parts of the brain that are active when we look at faces and places also light up when we imagine them. So seeing and imagining are the same to the brain in the context that it's the same brain areas that are involved and light up. So what does this verse tell us? It tells us that although for months Arjun had prepared for the war, considered the strategy, knew who would be fighting on which side, but he'd never actually tried to imagine in his mind, he'd never tried to picture the battlefield and envision it. What will it look like? Where will I be? Where will my brothers be? Where will the opposing army be? He had simply processed the facts with his thinking brain as to what will I do, what will be my strategy, what will be my arms, what other arms will be on my side, what formation should we take. But he never actually tried to imagine the actual battlefield and envision it. Now, when he's actually faced with this situation, he gets a shock. And he's experiencing all the symptoms we know today that shock can cause. And we will analyze this in much more detail in chapter 2, where we will show what happens when your amygdala, remember it's the two bits behind your eyes, which house your emotions, and which when they see something dangerous sound an alarm. And we'll see in chapter 2 that the symptoms he's describing are exactly as science tells us the symptoms will be when those two portions of the brain sound an alarm, and which is what's happening to him. He says his limbs are quivering. It's almost the first thing that happens. Your hands start to shake. Another way to put this is he's shivering. He also says his mouth is beginning to dry up. Well, many of us have experienced that when you get a shock or you enter a situation, you go to an exam room. How many of us have had the example where our palms are sweaty, and he's going to talk about his palms in a minute. Our mouth feels dry, we want to drink. Now, any doctor will tell us that these are common symptoms in shock because thirst is one of the first things we feel in shock.
So now he's going for more symptoms. It says, Vepathuscha sharire me roma harshascha jayate Gandivam samsate hastat tvakchaiva paridahyate na cha shaknomyavasthatum bhramati vachame manah nimittani cha pashyami viparitani keshava na cha shreyonupashyami hatva svajanamahave. So he says, Vepathuscha sharire me sharire vepathu. He says, shuddering my body, and roma harsascha jayate. He says my standing of my bodily hair. Gandivam sransate hastat. Gandivam, which we know is that Arjun's bow. He says that it is slipping from my hand. Tvakchaiva paridahyate, and my skin is burning. Nacha shaknomi avasthatum bhramati vachame mana. He says I am not able to stand. Bhramati vachame manah. My mind is wavering. Nacha shaknomyavasthatum bhramati vachame manah nimittani cha pashyami. He says, whatever I see, the omens, it says it's all opposite. He Keshava, nimittani cha pashyami viparitani Keshava, nacha shreyah anupashyami hatva svajanamahave. Now he's saying, I don't see any shreyah. So there are two words which our scriptures always describe, which is Shreya and Preya. Shreya, which relates to moksha. So which we can, we'll go a little more in further verses. But he says, I don't see Shreya in this particular battle after killing Swajanam Ahave. He said, after killing my own relatives. So he said, he's also saying all these symptoms, that because of these symptoms, I'm not able to fight.
So Arjun now continues. He says, my whole body shudders. My hair is standing on end. I'm getting goosebumps. My bow, the Gandiv, is slipping from my hand. My skin is burning all over. My mind is in quandary and whirling in confusion. I'm unable to hold myself steady any longer. O Krishna, killer of the Keshi demon, I only see omens of misfortune. I do not see how any good, in terms of growth towards moksha, can come from killing my own kinsman in this battle. Arjuna is now continuing to describe the symptoms well known to be of shock, usually in the order in which they appear. Weakness, he says, I cannot hold my bow. Shuddering, confusion, he says his mind is in a quandary and whirling in confusion. Feeling unsteady. The symptoms are described in the order in which they appear for Arjuna. Now he feels uneasy and he feels that they're omens of a misfortune. In other words, he, of course, doesn't recognize his own medical symptoms. He's therefore unable to see the purpose of the battle and is asking, well, what good is this battle going to do? Let's also note the difference between Duryodhana and Arjuna. Remember, Duryodhana in the opening verses talked about what was priya to him, what he likes, what's dear to him. Arjuna is not asking what's dear to him. He uses the word Shreya. Shreya is those things that help us towards moksha or liberation. They may not necessarily be things that we like, but they are things that are nevertheless good for us in our quest for moksha. Then he addresses Sri Krishna as Keshav, or the one who killed the demon, Kashi. So he's asking Sri Krishna by implication, okay, you killed a demon, I understand that, and you killed many other demons. But my situation is completely different, isn't it? I'm actually being put in a position where I have to kill my own relatives, many of whom are very, very dear to me. So he's pointing out to Sri Krishna, why am I feeling so upset? I understand that you too have had to kill, but you have killed demons, very, very bad people. But I'm actually not being asked to kill a demon, I'm actually being asked to kill people who are my relatives, and many of whom are extremely dear to me, or whom I'm very, very fond.
So now he says in next verse, he says, Nakangshe vijayam Krishna, nacha rajyam sukhani cha, kim no rajyena govinda, kim bhogair jivitena va, yesham arthe kangshitam no, rajyam bhoga sukhani cha, ta ime vasthita yuddhe pranaus tyaktva dhanani cha. So he says that Nachasya in the previous one, he says, I don't see Shreya. Now he says, Nakangshe Vijayam. Hey Krishna. He says, Krishna, I don't want any victory. Nacha Rajyam Sukhanicha. I don't need or I don't want any kingdom or any kind of happiness. Kimno Rajyena Govinda. Hey Govinda, means again the name of Sri Krishna. Kimna Rajyena. After killing them also, if I will get kingdom, with that what? Bhogaihi jivitenava, even though I get prosperity or even life, with that also, what I'm going to do with that? He says, Yesham arthe kangshitam naha. For them, what I need or what we want, rajyam bhogaha sukhanicha, the kingdom, the prosperities, or sukham means happiness. Te ime avasthita yuddhe. They all are. So for them which we want these all, they all are standing in this battlefield, pranaus tyaktva dhananicha, living their life and their wealth. So he says, after living these all things and they are ready to fight, why do we need this kingdom? Why do we need this all happiness? So this is what he says in these two verses.
He says, O Krishna, I do not desire victory, kingdom, or the happiness accompanying it. Of what avail will be a kingdom, pleasures, or even life itself, when the very persons for whose sake we desire them are standing before us for battle, ready to give up their lives and their wealth? So this verse is a very interesting verse as an insight into Arjuna's character, which we'll see more and more of, and which will explain to us why he's so dear to Sri Krishna. So he's actually saying, I don't want victory or kingdom or the happiness. So he's saying, I don't want any of these things, all of which are part of the material world. I'm not interested in them. So what he's saying to Sri Krishna here is, what other reason is there for me to fight this battle? Give me some other reason than that, oh, you'll have a kingdom on this earth. You'll have a lot of wealth. I don't want any of that. So he's almost asking Sri Krishna, and he will ask him more later, give me some spiritual reason to fight. And that's why he's used the word Shreya. Give me some reason to fight, which is Shreya, means which will take me towards liberation from birth and death. I'm not interested in the material aspect of it. He calls Sri Krishna Govind, which means both one who loves cows. You remember Sri Krishna in his childhood used to tend cows. As well as one who gives pleasure to the senses. Now, part of the pleasures of a kingdom are obviously likely to be the wealth that accompanies the kingdom and the position and benefits which please our senses. And Arjuna is saying, I'm not interested in that. Not at the cost of so many dead people. The next two statements we're going to see, verses 34-35, are also fascinating as an insight into Arjuna's character. He basically says people would want things like kingdom and wealth and pleasures and happiness associated with wealth and kingdom, but for the sake of those we love and care for, not for the sake of the items in themselves. They are of no interest to us. Let's see the next two verses. So we're now coming to verses 34-35, which we'll take together.
So as he mentioned the materialistic wealth, now he's again going back to the relatives. He says, Acharyah pitarah putras tathaiva cha pitamahaha matula shvasura pautraha shyala sambandhinastatha etannahantum ichchami gnatopi madhusudana api trailokya rajyasya hetoh kinnu mahikrute. He says Acharya. So now he begins with Acharya, means teachers. Pitara, fathers. Putraha, sons. Tathaiva, and Pitamaha, all grandfathers. Matulaha means maternal uncles. Swasuraha is in-laws. Pautraha, again grandsons. Shyalaha, brother-in-laws. Sambandhinaha, all other relatives. So he's giving all relatives names one by one. He said, Eta na hantum ichchami. He said, I don't want to kill them. Gnatopi Madhusudana. Even I get killed, but I don't want to kill them. Hey Madhusudana. So now he's reminding Krishna that you have killed the great demon called Madhu. He said, Api Trailokya Rajyasya hetoh kim nu mahikrute. Even though Api Trailokya Rajyasya, if I get the kingdom of all three lokas, means all three worlds, what is the purpose of that? Means what is the purpose of Mahikrute? Mahikrute means he said, for even though if I get three worlds, I don't want to fight, then why should I fight for Mahikrute, means for earth? So this is what he is saying, that I don't want to fight.
So he says teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, grandsons, fathers-in-law, grandnephews, brothers-in-law, and other kinsmen are present here, staking their lives and their riches. O Madhusudan, I do not wish to slay them, even if they attack me. If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra, what satisfaction will we derive from the dominion of the three worlds? What to speak of this earth? It's a fascinating verse from Arjuna. The three worlds he speaks of loosely can be translated as heaven, earth, and hell. He then returns to the theme of the people who are on the battlefield and in some way or another are related to him or associated with him. And we can see that he's filled with compassion for all the people on the battlefield. It's very interesting that he mentions even the sons of Dhritarashtra. Now remember, we said earlier on that Duryodhana could be defined as a terrorist. He's committed all the acts that can be defined as terrorism even today. And he has terrorized his family. But this is a person so compassionate what does he say? If we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra who've committed terrorist acts against us, what satisfaction will be derived? How many of us can truthfully say today, when the world is filled with terrorism, that we would say about terrorists, no, even if they attack me, I wish them no harm. And that was Arjun's character, and one explanation of why he was so dear to Sri Krishna. Now, it may be that his compassion was misplaced. We'll see that when we come to later verses. Now, the use of Sri Krishna's name as Madhusudan is also very pointed, because it means the one who killed the demon Madhu. So once more, Arjun is reminding Sri Krishna that yes, in his life, he too has had to kill. Remember, Sri Krishna is born as a prince, a warrior. But he's killing monsters and demons. Arjun, on the other hand, is in a situation where he's being asked to kill or do actions which result in the death of members of his own family, many of which were very, very dear to him. And even if the sons of Dhritarashtra were not very, very dear to him, we can see his character and his compassion are such that he doesn't want to kill even them, despite all the harm that they've done to the Pandavas. So he's trying to preclude Sri Krishna from answering him by saying, well, sometimes it is necessary for a soldier to kill, by reminding Sri Krishna the huge difference, i.e., who did you kill and who are you asking me to kill? So Arjun is basically working himself up into a situation where he wants to say, I'm going to disengage from this battlefield and I'm going to withdraw from this battle. I don't want to fight this. Let's continue with the next two verses and we'll get a further glimpse into Arjun's quite extraordinary character, which explains to us, as I said again, why he's so dear to Sri Krishna.
Yes, so now he's adding some more in that. He says, Nihatya dharta rashtrannah ka priti sya janardana papameva ashrayedasman hatvaitana tatainah tasman narha vayam hantum dharta rashtran swabandhavan swajanam hi katham hatva sukhinasya mamadhava. Now he said, Nihatya dharta rashtranah. Dharta rashtran nihatya means who are the sons of Dhritarashtra. Nihatya means killing them. Ka pritihi syad janardana. Hey Janardana means Janan ardayati. He says Janardana is Sri Krishna. He says who makes the devotees happy. That calls Janardana. So he says Ka pritihi. How can we be happy after killing sons of Dhritarashtra? Papam eva ashrayed asman. After killing them, we will just collect negativities. Hatva etan adatainaha. Even though now he is calling them adatai. Adatai word used as terrorist. Even though he is calling them terrorist, but he still says that even though after killing these terrorists, adatai will just have negativities. Papa means negativities. They translate it sins, but it is negativities. Tasman na arha vayam hantum. We are not eager or we are not happy to kill Dhartarashtran swabandhavan. Now this shows the Arjuna's character, who are the sons of Dhritarashtra swabandhavan. Now he says my own relatives, swabandhava. Swajanam hi katham hatva. After killing my own relatives, swajana, sukhinah syam madhava. How can we be happy by killing our own relatives? So again, Arjuna is referring word swajana, swabandhavan, and we have seen that about how Dhritarashtra was saying that Panduputraha, how Duryodhana has said. But now this shows the how Arjuna's character. But here, Atatai, it says that there are 6 kinds of Atatai. So you say Agnidaha, Gadadas Shastrapanir. So he says the first one who makes fire or who fires somebody's house. Garadaha, who is poisoning to others. He says Parastri Harana, who kidnaps somebody, some women. He said parastri hatya, who kills others women. Parasambhavi, whose intention is not good or is bad intention. And there's Paradarapahari, somebody who is kidnapping somebody's wife. So these are 6 atatai who are the qualities of terrorist. And now we can see that all these actions have done by the Dhritarashtraputra, which is Kauravas. So these are the adatais according to scripture. Yeah.
So in this verse he says, O giver of moksha, that means Sri Krishna, what pleasure will be derived from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? Even though they may be terrorists, sin will certainly come upon us if we slay them. Negativity. Hence it does not behove us to kill our own cousins, the sons of Dhritarashtra and friends. O Madhav, Krishna, how can we hope to be happy by killing our own kinsmen? Arjuna reminds Sri Krishna that he is the giver of moksha, freedom from the eternal cycle of birth and death. In other words, the one who really looks after creation, but specifically mankind, intelligent beings, to enable us to cut through the cycle of birth and deaths. Now we'll review the research on reincarnation later on in other chapters as we go through the Gita. We're not doing that right now because right now we are focused on Arjuna's mental condition, which is the issue here. Jinichi's just explained the different types of terrorists, and the sons of Dhritarashtra have done all of them and therefore are terrorists. But he says despite the fact that Dhritarashtra's children are terrorists and have done so much wrong to the Pandavas, nevertheless he says he will get no satisfaction, leave aside pleasure from killing them. And this is not actually as surprising as it may seem. Now let's look at some studies of World War II veterans that suggest that very few men are innately bellicose. Psychiatrists Roy Swank, and Walter Marchant found that 98% of soldiers who endured 60 days of continuous combat suffered psychiatric symptoms, either temporary or permanent. So what Arjuna is feeling is not unusual. 2 out of 100 soldiers who seemed unscathed by prolonged combat displayed aggressive psychopathic personalities. In other words, there was something wrong with them, the psychiatrists report. In other words, combat does not drive people crazy, or such people crazy, because they are crazy to begin with. Similarly, Duryodhana had no problem in trying to burn the Pandavas alive or in killing them now because he was innately crazy. Arjuna was not, and his character was so far removed from this type of craziness in the opposite direction that he was going into shock. In further work, surveys of World War II infantrymen carried out by US Army Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall found that only 15 to 20% had fired their weapons in combat, even when ordered to do so. Marshall concluded that most soldiers avoid firing at the enemy, at least initially, because they fear killing as well as being killed. The average and healthy individual, Marshall contends in his post-war book, Men Against Fire, has such an inner and usually unrealized resistance towards killing a fellow man that he will not of his own volition take life if it is possible to turn away from that responsibility. At the vital point, he becomes a conscientious objector. Now, we may say it's too late to be a conscientious objector on the battlefield. You should be a conscientious objector before. But what Marshall is saying that it's one thing to realize a war is coming or a battle is coming and I will have to participate in it. It's very difficult seeing the faces, and very different seeing the faces of men and women on the other side and then still firing your weapon. And he suggests that in World War II, infantrymen, only 15 to 20% fired their weapons on the initial order. It's only when the other side then also started firing that they realized that they had to fire, and they fired. That's a very interesting statistics, that 80% of people disobeyed the order to fire. Note that although the article is called Why Soldiers Get a Kick Out of Killing, what the article actually concludes is that even in soldiers, we see very clearly the powerful, innate human resistance towards killing one's own species. Now please note, Slam Marshall is regarded as one of the US's great military historians and looked into the heart of combat. However, other historians have challenged his figures. But even if the 20% became 40%, it meant that the majority did not fire. Arjun points out the sin in killing, and finally, in desperation, he asks Sri Krishna how he could possibly be happy killing his own kinsman. Using the word Madhav, he again, for about the third or fourth time, politely points out the difference between killing a demon and killing his own kinsman. And there we will leave it for today. We will see in the next few verses, which will bring us to the end of chapter 1, the mental effect and strain this is having on Arjun. And then in chapter 2, by verse 11, Sri Krishna starts to teach. Thank you again for listening. We hope you are enjoying these sessions, and we hope to see you in the next session. Thank you very much. Namaste. Jai Shri Krishna.